Racist cop points gun at senior female Army officer, loses his job instantly. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and share where you're watching from in the comments section. Your support will help us bring more meaningful stories like this. Colonel Thompson Brooks stepped into a modest yet bustling supermarket on a quiet, sunlit weekend afternoon in Austin, Texas. Dressed in a simple white blouse, well-fitted blue jeans, and a pair of worn but comfortable sneakers, she moved seamlessly among the ordinary shoppers, indistinguishable from any other civilian. With a practiced ease, she perused the shelves, selecting essentials for her home. This simple act, an errand as routine as any, offered her a rare moment of solitude, a contrast to the high-stakes decisions she had spent her life making in service to her country. Few would guess, upon a passing glance, that this seemingly unassuming woman had commanded hundreds of soldiers, led critical missions in some of the world's most dangerous regions, and dedicated her career to upholding the values of discipline, integrity, and responsibility. The supermarket hummed with the soft murmurs of customers, the occasional beep of scanned items, and the distant sound of a child pleading for candy. For Thompson, these mundane details felt grounding, a welcome reprieve from the heavy burdens of military service. She savored these quiet moments, appreciating the simplicity of selecting fresh produce and comparing brands of coffee. Yet, as she reached the end of an aisle, the tranquility was abruptly shattered by an action so small yet so revealing of character that it stopped her in her tracks. At the far end of the aisle, a tall man in a police uniform strolled past a shelf stacked with instant noodles and bottled beverages. As he reached for something absent-mindedly, his hand brushed against a precariously placed packet of noodles and a bottle of soda. Both tumbled to the floor with a muted thud. The officer, whose badge identified him as Emily Smith, glanced briefly at the fallen items before continuing forward, his stride unaffected, as if nothing had happened. Thompson Millicent. Years of military training had sharpened her ability to notice the smallest details, and more importantly, to recognize the implications behind them. An officer, someone entrusted with maintaining law and order, ignoring a minor inconvenience of his own making might seem trivial to many, but to Thompson, it signified something deeper, a disregard for responsibility, a dismissive attitude toward basic accountability. If he neglected something as simple as picking up after himself, what else did he neglect when no one was watching? With quiet determination, Thompson stepped forward. Her voice was calm, steady, but carried the weight of authority. "Excuse me, sir," she said, making sure her tone was both polite and firm. "I believe you dropped something. You might want to pick it up so it doesn't inconvenience others." Emily turned his head toward her, his expression shifting from mild curiosity to irritation. His gaze swept over her, dismissing her instantly. Then, with a smirk that carried the weight of years of unchecked arrogance, he replied, "And who exactly do you think you are to tell me what to do? I don't have time for this nonsense." Thompson's posture remained unchanged, but inside she felt a slow burn of disappointment, not just for this man's behavior, but for the deeper, systemic issues it represented. "All due respect," she replied evenly. "As a police officer, you have a duty to set an example. A simple act like picking up after yourself isn't just about courtesy, it's about integrity." Emily's eyes darkened. Instead of acknowledging his oversight, he leaned in slightly, his expression condescending. "Lady, I don't answer to you. Go mind your own business." A murmur rippled through the nearby shoppers who had begun to take notice of the exchange. Some subtly turned their heads, others openly stopped to watch. Thompson could feel their collective attention, but she remained composed. "This isn't about me," she responded. "It's about respect. For yourself, for the uniform you wear, and for the people who trust you to uphold the law." Yomi laid out a short, humorless laugh. "Oh, I see. You think you know what responsibility looks like? Please. I deal with real problems every day. This is beneath me." Thompson exhaled slowly, suppressing the rising frustration. No duty is beneath a real leader. True leadership means owning every action, no matter how small. It means understanding that the little things define who we are. Emily tossed his arms, an open challenge in his stance. Listen, lady, I don't need a lecture from someone who... He trailed off as Thompson took a slow step forward. Not aggressively, not confrontationally, but with a quiet strength that demanded respect. You don't know who I am, she said, her voice steady, unwavering. And honestly, that doesn't matter. What matters is that the people around you, the people who look up to you as an officer of the law, are watching. Right now, they see a man who refuses to take responsibility for the simplest of actions. Is that the image you want to leave behind? Emily's smirk faltered for just a second, a flicker of hesitation crossing his features. Around them, the air felt charged, expectant. A few bystanders held their phones up, recording the moment. Thompson knew this was no longer just about spilled groceries. It was about principles, about the kind of world people chose to shape through their everyday actions. He glanced around, clearly aware of the growing audience. His jaw tightened. Then, with an exaggerated sigh, he bent down, grabbed the fallen items, and slammed them back onto the shelf without care. There. Happy now? Thompson gave a small nod, though the gesture carried no triumph. That wasn't for me, she said. That was for you. Without waiting for a response, she turned away, resuming her shopping as if the exchange had never occurred. But as she walked away, she could feel the weight of the moment lingering in the air, a silent reminder that integrity was not about grand gestures, but about the choices people made when they thought no one was watching. Emmeline's frown deepened, his carefully constructed confidence beginning to unravel under the weight of Thompson's unwavering gaze. He studied her, desperately searching for any flicker of hesitation or self-doubt, anything that might indicate she wasn't as certain as she seemed. But Thompson stood as firm as a bronze statue, her expression resolute, her posture unshaken. There was no fear, no faltering, only a calm, formidable presence that unsettled him more than any shouting or pleading ever could. Around them, the supermarket had fallen into a tense hush. The murmurs of shoppers had died down, replaced by an almost eerie silence as bystanders leaned in, drawn irresistibly into the confrontation. Some had even pulled out their phones, the glow of screens illuminating their intent expressions as they recorded every second, capturing the moment that had turned from a minor argument into something far more consequential. Emily clenched his fists, his pride refusing to let him back down. "Don't try to play noble in front of me," he spat, his voice low but laced with venom. "You're nothing but a troublemaker, looking for attention. If I wanted, I could throw you out of here this instant." Thompson's lips twitched, not in amusement but in a controlled, almost imperceptible reaction that sent a chill through those watching. It was the expression of someone who was not just unafraid but in complete control. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft, deliberate, and cutting as a blade. "If you believe your authority gives you the right to act however you please, then let's put that theory to the test. The law will answer for you. And I promise, it will not favor those who abuse their power." The tension in the supermarket solidified like ice, the very air around them charged with anticipation. The employees at the registers had gone still, the distant hum of checkout scanners the only sound interrupting the quiet. Every eye was locked on the two figures at the center of it all. Emilil, broad-shouldered and imposing, his aggression barely concealed beneath a mask of authority, and Thompson, unassuming in size but carrying herself with an undeniable gravity that commanded respect. If you are still watching this video and found this story helpful, please comment 1 below to let me know you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. Emily scoffed, though the arrogance in his posture was beginning to crack. "You can talk all you want, but words don't mean a thing. You think these people will stand up for you?" He gestured around, eyes flicking toward the crowd. "They'll forget about this in an hour." Thompson met his gaze steadily, her voice unwavering. Maybe they will, but right now they are here. Right now they are watching, and right now they know the truth. She took a step forward, closing the distance between them just slightly. You can try to insult me, but I am not standing here for myself. I am standing here for something greater, for the values that should never be trampled under the weight of unchecked power. The weight of her words settled heavily over the supermarket. Even those who had initially only been curious spectators now found themselves drawn in, a quiet but undeniable shift in the atmosphere as the crowd edged subtly closer to Thompson's side. Their silence was no longer one of indifference. It was one of quiet, building solidarity. Emily's jaw tightened. He felt the tide turning against him, the control he had taken for granted slipping through his fingers like sand. His next words came harsher, more desperate. I'm warning you, don't make this worse. I am the police, and I have every right to handle this situation however I see fit. Thompson didn't flinch. Instead, she calmly reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. Not in fear, not in a frantic motion of self-defense, but in a measured, deliberate movement that spoke of a woman who had already foreseen every step of this encounter. Her fingers moved deftly, dialing with precision. You have your rights, she said evenly, her eyes never leaving Emily. But so do I. Let's see which side the law truly favors. The line connected almost immediately. Thompson's voice, though quiet, carried effortlessly through the tense air. This is Colonel Thompson Anderson. I require immediate assistance at Central Supermarket. There is an officer on site abusing his authority and threatening civilians. I request an immediate response. Emily's face paled slightly, the blood draining from his features as the gravity of the situation settled in. Around them, the hushed murmurs of the crowd erupted into more urgent whispers. Some had stopped recording on their phones, not because they lost interest, but because they were now dialing numbers of their own, calling for reinforcements, for news outlets, for anyone who could ensure that this moment wouldn't simply be forgotten. After a workout. What do you think you're doing? Emmeline gnarled, stepping closer, his voice rough with frustration. Thompson didn't retreat. Her gaze held firm, piercing through the facade he had built around himself. I'm doing what you should have been doing all along. Defending justice. Before Emily could respond, the distant wail of sirens sliced through the air, the unmistakable sound of law enforcement closing in. The crowd instinctively shifted, parting slightly to create a pathway as the flashing lights of approaching police cars cast blue and red reflections across the supermarket's polished floors. Then the automatic doors slid open and a figure stepped inside. A man whose very presence demanded authority. Mayor Andrew Preston. His sharp gaze swept across the supermarket, assessing the scene with the practiced scrutiny of someone accustomed to handling difficult situations. When his eyes landed on Thompson, a flicker of recognition crossed his face. Emily, who had been scrambling to reclaim his dominance, immediately stiffened. The arrogance that had defined his demeanor moments ago had all but vanished, replaced by visible unease. He licked his lips, attempting to regain composure. Mr. Mayor, this is just a misunderstanding, he started, his tone suddenly far more careful. There was a small situation, and I was simply, Enough. The word was not shouted, nor was it said in anger, yet it cut through the supermarket like a knife. The mayor's voice was calm, but the authority in it left no room for argument. Andrew's gaze didn't waver as he continued. I came here because I received an urgent call from Colonel Thompson Anderson, a woman I respect immensely, and I arrived to find not just her account, but an entire store full of witnesses and video evidence confirming exactly what she described. He let the silence hang for a moment before adding, Do you think a weak excuse will erase what you've done? Emily swallowed hard. His once unshakable presence had crumbled completely. The man who had stood tall and defiant mere moments ago now appeared small. his bluster reduced to nothing under the weight of justice closing in around him. Thompson remained still, her expression unchanging. She had seen this play out before and had fought battles like these more times than she could count. But as she stood there, watching the realization dawn on Emily's face, she knew one thing for certain. Justice had won this round. Andrew walked toward her with steady, measured steps, his expression shifting from the usually composed demeanor of a leader to something softer, tinged with concern. His sharp eyes searched hers for any sign of distress, his voice firm yet gentle as he spoke. "Colonel Anderson, I sincerely hope you are unharmed. This kind of behavior is entirely unacceptable and, rest assured, it will be dealt with accordingly. No one under my watch will abuse their power without consequences." Thompson met his gaze, her stance unwavering, her voice calm but carrying the weight of conviction. "I appreciate your concern, Mayor, but this isn't just about me. It's about something much larger than one person or one incident. If I hadn't stood up today, countless others would continue to be mistreated, their voices unheard. Those in positions of authority must be held accountable, or we will continue to live in a society where power is wielded without justice." Andrew nodded solemnly, his expression darkening as he turned toward Emily Smith, the officer in question. His eyes, once warm, turned cold and unyielding, his voice carrying an unmistakable tone of finality. "Emily, you have disgraced your badge, you have abused your authority, disrespected a decorated military officer, and tarnished the trust that the public once had in this city's law enforcement. You are unfit to wear that uniform any longer." A hush fell over the gathered crowd as a woman, previously standing among the onlookers, stepped forward. She clutched her phone tightly, her face resolute as she held out the device to Andrew. "I recorded everything," she said firmly. "The world deserves to see what happened here today." Andrew took the phone, his sharp gaze scanning the video. As he watched, his expression hardened further, the weight of undeniable evidence pressing upon him. He lifted his head, his voice ringing with authority as he issued his next command. "This behavior will not be tolerated in this city. Officers, remove his badge, his weapon, and his authority immediately. An internal investigation will be launched at once, and Emily Smith will face the full extent of disciplinary action." Emily stood frozen, his face draining of color. The arrogance that had once shaped his expression was gone, replaced by disbelief and growing panic. He opened his mouth to protest, but the weight of the moment left him speechless. The officers flanking him carried out the mayor's orders swiftly, stripping him of the insignia that once symbolized his power. The resounding click of his badge being unpinned seemed to echo in the air. As the realization of his downfall settled in, the crowd erupted in applause, a tribute to justice being served and to Thompson's unwavering stand. Thompson, though she had never sought recognition, felt a quiet relief settle within her. She had done what was right, and the truth had prevailed. Andrew turned back to her, his voice softer now, tinged with admiration. "Colonel Anderson, this city needs people like you, people who remind us of our duty, our responsibility, and the integrity we should uphold. I regret that you had to endure such treatment today." Thompson nodded, gratitude reflecting in her steady gaze. "Thank you, Mayor. I only hope that this moment sparks real change, not just in policy but in the way people in power view their responsibility to the public." Andrew's expression grew thoughtful. "We will make sure of that. This is only the beginning." As Thompson stepped out of the supermarket and into the sunlight, she took a deep breath, allowing herself a moment of peace. But she knew this fight, for justice, for fairness, was far from over. Today was one battle won, but the war against corruption and abuse of power was ongoing, and she was prepared to keep fighting, not just for herself, but for those who had no voice. Meanwhile, Emily Smith's fate took a rapid and humiliating downturn. As he was escorted to a police vehicle, the weight of the situation finally settled on him. The once respected officer was now just another man, stripped of his authority, drowning in disgrace. The crowd's whispers and murmurs followed him like shadows, their critical eyes watching his every movement. At the police station, his interrogation began immediately. Video evidence was laid out before him, alongside testimony from multiple witnesses. His attempts to justify his actions fell flat. The head of the police department, informed of the situation by Mayor Andrew Preston, did not hesitate in condemning him. "Your actions are a stain on this institution. Effective immediately, you are suspended, pending further investigation. The people of this city deserve officers they can trust, and you have violated that trust beyond repair." As the news spread, it ignited a storm of outrage. The video of Emily's misconduct went viral, viewed millions of times, sparking heated debates about police accountability. People who had once feared speaking out against him now came forward with their own stories, detailing years of unchecked power and intimidation. His situation deteriorated rapidly as past grievances resurfaced, each one further sealing his fate. Once a man who had basked in the authority his badge granted him, Emil now faced a grim reality. His former colleagues distanced themselves, his allies vanished, and the city turned its back on him. Alone in his small house, he sat in silence, the weight of his mistakes pressing down on him. He had thought power made him untouchable, but in the end, it had only led to his downfall. Meanwhile, Thompson Anderson remained steadfast in her mission. She neither sought fame nor reveled in the attention, yet her actions had left a lasting impact. She received countless messages of gratitude from people who had long suffered under the abuse of unchecked power. But for her, this was never about recognition. It was about doing what was right. The ripples of that fateful day continued to spread. The local police force faced increased scrutiny, and reforms were introduced to prevent future abuses. Training programs on ethics and accountability were implemented, with Thompson invited to speak at seminars and forums. Standing before crowds of officers, citizens, and officials alike, she shared her story, not to glorify herself, but to serve as a reminder that power is only meaningful when used to protect, not to oppress. As for Emily, his downfall was absolute. The investigation unearthed further misconduct, and he was not only dismissed from the force but also faced criminal charges. His trial was public and humiliating, each hearing serving as another reminder of the price he had paid for his arrogance. In the courtroom, he no longer carried the bravado that once defined him. Instead, he sat with his head bowed, a broken man, facing the consequences of his own choices. If you are still watching this video and found this story helpful, please comment below to let me know you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. And so, justice was served. Not just for Thompson Anderson, but for every individual who had been wronged by those who believed themselves above accountability. The world had been reminded once again that power, when abused, comes with a heavy cost. And as Thompson continued her fight for fairness and integrity, she knew that the battle was far from over. But she would always be ready to stand up, no matter what came next. Thompson, however, did not confine herself to merely sharing personal stories. She became a beacon of hope and an inspiration for countless movements dedicated to justice, equality, and integrity. Her actions spoke louder than words, and soon, articles, interviews, and videos capturing her unwavering stance spread across social media and news platforms. They reached people from all walks of life, encouraging them to rise against injustice and oppression. Her story was not just about individual courage, it became a rallying cry for those who had long been silenced by fear or doubt. Yet, despite the growing recognition, Thompson remained humble. She did not seek fame or accolades, but continued her work with quiet determination. Her unwavering commitment to justice was evident in her role within the military, where she proved that true strength is not measured by power or authority, but by one's integrity and moral courage. She refused to compromise her values, even when faced with adversity, and her resilience made her an unshakable force for good. Whenever she reflected on the pivotal incident that had brought her into the spotlight, she felt neither regret nor hesitation. Instead, she carried a deep sense of quiet pride, knowing that her actions had ignited change, however small, within society. For Thompson, her journey was not about a single act of defiance, but about a lifelong commitment to standing up for what was right. She understood that the battle for justice was ongoing, requiring persistence, unity, and the courage to challenge the status quo. She welcomed the challenges ahead, knowing that each step she took paved the way for others to follow. Thompson Anderson's legacy was not merely confined to the headlines or viral videos that documented her fearless stand against criticism and threats. Her influence extended far beyond the screen, leaving an indelible mark on the way people perceived justice, responsibility, and the role of law enforcement. Her steadfastness resonated deeply within the military and the broader community, particularly among women and marginalized groups who had long struggled against systemic discrimination. Her name became synonymous with resilience. When people recounted her story, they did not just remember the supermarket incident that thrust her into the public eye. They spoke of a woman who, despite overwhelming opposition, refused to back down. She was a symbol of resistance, a figure who challenged outdated norms and empowered others to do the same. Thompson's influence was not limited to symbolic gestures. The workshops she participated in became platforms for vital conversations about dignity, ethics, and human rights. She worked tirelessly to reform police training and recruitment, ensuring that officers understood the importance of integrity and professional ethics. Her advocacy played a significant role in shaping policies that encouraged law enforcement to act with accountability and fairness. But Thompson's true impact lay not in policy changes alone. It was in the lives she touched, the countless individuals she mentored, the young people who saw her as a role model, and the communities that found strength in her unwavering resolve. She never sought recognition, but the respect she garnered from colleagues, activists, and everyday citizens was a testament to the transformative power of integrity. Through every obstacle and every challenge, Thompson stood firm, knowing that true legacy is not measured by awards or titles, but by the principles one upholds and the inspiration one leaves behind. For Thompson, her mission was never about personal gain. It was about the change she sparked, the doors she opened for future generations. She envisioned a world where standing up for justice was not an exception, but the norm, a world where individuals refused to be bystanders in the face of wrongdoing. No matter how many years passed, Thompson Anderson's legacy would live on, not just in books, interviews, or speeches, but in the countless lives she inspired to carry forward the fight for a more just and equitable society. After the tumultuous case involving Emily Smith, Thompson did not consider her work finished. If anything, it marked the beginning of a greater mission. She came to realize that injustice was not an isolated event but a systemic issue that required deep, foundational change. Each day she encountered new stories, accounts of oppression, abuse, and silencing that fueled her determination to act. She understood that meaningful change could not rely solely on the efforts of a few courageous individuals. It required a collective movement. She dedicated herself to building this movement, one that empowered ordinary people to recognize their rights and fight for them. She reached out to communities, inviting them to take a stand against systemic injustices. Thompson launched awareness campaigns, urging citizens and law enforcement alike to reevaluate their roles in upholding justice. She organized town hall meetings, workshops, and educational initiatives that fostered conversations about ethics, accountability, and the abuse of power. One of her most memorable slogans, 10 echoed in her speeches, was, "Each of us has the right to say no to injustice. Each of us has the power to make a difference." Her activism extended beyond the military and law enforcement. She became a voice for those in marginalized communities, people who had been excluded from conversations about justice for too long. She encouraged them to speak up, to claim their rights, and to challenge the oppressive systems that sought to silence them. She understood that power should never be feared, rather it should be held accountable. By this time, Thompson's mindset had shifted from cautious optimism to resolute determination. She knew that every protest, every petition, and every speech had the potential to ripple through society, igniting a broader movement. She was no longer fighting solely for herself. She was fighting for those who had been silenced, for those who had lost hope, and for those who believed in a world where justice was not a privilege, but a right. The road ahead was not without obstacles. Some resisted her message, those who sought to undermine her efforts, and those who dismissed her as an idealist. But Thompson remained undeterred. She had long accepted that change was a slow and arduous process, but she also knew that persistence and unity were stronger than any resistance she would face. With every speech she delivered and every initiative she spearheaded, Thompson turned her fight into a powerful movement. She became a reminder that justice was not a solitary pursuit, but a collective responsibility. And as long as there were injustices to challenge and voices to be heard, Thompson Anderson would continue to lead the way, one unwavering step at a time. And that wraps up this powerful story. What have you learned from this situation? Let us know in the comments below. What's one key takeaway that you will apply in your own life? If you enjoyed this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support helps us bring more meaningful stories like this to light. Also, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We love hearing from our global audience. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay informed, stay inspired, and always stand for what's right.